JanetOnOccasion, and welcome to another Total War Warhammer campaign lore play. So today, we finished talking about Kislev in the last episode and the last interim episode, and so now we're going to talk about Averland. I decided it's going to be Averland first, just in case I need to squeeze more in, because I think there's a bit more stuff I want to talk about with Averland than with Ostermark. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So the Grand County of Averland, as it's known. There's no ruler at the moment, but we'll just pretend it's Marius Leitdorf, shall we? Because, gonna assume that Storm of Chaos hasn't happened for, the ruler to exist again, because I like him. So we're just gonna, assume that he's alive and everything's fine, and but other stuff has happened, and we'll talk about him, because he's an interesting fellow. So anyway, so the capital is Averheim, as I'm sure you know, and so the land, lacking the great forests that cover much of the rest of the empire, Averland is a series of sun-drenched rolling plains, running roughly northwest to southeast between the rivers of the Upper Reich, the Aver, and the Blue Reach. To the west lie Wissenland and Nuln, while the plains rise in the east to meet the Black and World's Edge Mountains. Within the mountains are the kingdoms of the dwarfs, which stand between Averland and the Border Princes. Averland is a fertile country, its plains watered by the annual floods of the great rivers that border it. In some years the waters crest far higher than usual, flooding many of the cities and towns along their banks. Averlanders see this as a price to pay for having abundant crops. In recent years, the elect towns of Averland have begun discussions with the dwarfs of Carrick and Gazhar in the Black Mountains to construct a series of dikes and levees along the north bank of the Upper Reich to control its waters in flood season. Both Wissenland and the Engineers Guild of Nuln have protested this, the former because they feel their lands will suffer more, while the Engineers Guild claims that such work is theirs by right and should go to humans regardless. So I find that quite amusing. Wissenland thinking, they're trying to steal all our water. Anyway, away from the rivers, the plains rise gently to the geographical centre of the province, where the Old Dwarf Road and Agbeiten Road meet at Heideck. The interior of Averland is given over to small villages of tenants that dot the vast fiefs of the rural nobility. In the west and central portions of the province, nobles devote themselves mostly to the raising of the famous Averland Longhorn cattle, leading their herds each year to the stockyards of Averheim and Lonningbrück for slaughter and export. While some barons, particularly near Nuln, have adopted sophisticated airs and consider themselves above actually guiding a herd to market, more conservative and traditional families still consider it a point of honour to personally lead their cattle, showing them off before rivals. Residents of the two towns know to stay out of the local taverns when the cattle lords are in town, as their retainers like nothing better than a good brawl. In the south, central and eastern portions of the country, cattle raising partly gives way to viticulture and winemaking. As the country, there is more suited to the growing of quality grapes than in most parts of western Averland. Grapes are either pressed and the wine made on the estates, or the grapes are transported to nearby towns where brokers will sell them to local winemakers. Famous and infamous Averlander wines include the Grenstatter wine, which fetches high prices in Marienburg, where it is the fashion, and Lonningbrück Ruby wine, which is produced quickly and is popular with disconcerting beggars from Nuln to Karreburg. The Far East is home to traders in gems, minerals, and furs. Many humans mine the foothills of the Black and World's Edge Mountains, giving a portion of the take to the local lord in return for rights to work the mine. Few venture far into the mountains in search of mineral wealth, however, for eventually they would trespass on the claims of the dwarfs, who have no hesitation about hauling a claim jumper before a human court and demanding restitution. The elect counts of Averland are anxious to keep the dwarfs happy, and they have secretly instructed their local vassals to find for the dwarfs whenever possible. The furs commonly brought down from the mountains are beaver, otter, and rare blue mink, named for the bluish sheen to its fur. Quality furs fetch high prices in the markets of the big cities, and trappers have to be wary of those who would steal their hard-won gains. So, Averlanders claim their ancestors arrived in the province during the Great Migrations around minus 1000 IC. Masters of horses and chariot warfare, the Burgundians drove out or conquered the existing tribes and made themselves lords of all they surveyed. From their great camp and fort at the site of the future Averheim, the kings of the Burgundians made war against the humans of the Umborigin, Osseborns, and Meridian tribes, and the invading bands of orcs and goblins. They developed good relations with the dwarfs and often provided cavalry for their armies. The Burgundians developed reputations as fierce warriors who liked to strike fast and hard, and they had the respect of even their bitterest rivals. Indeed, their leader, Sigurd, was given the honour of accompanying Sigmar himself in the final charge at the Battle of Blackfire Pass. I believe Sigmar actually rode on Sigurd's chariot, which is fun. While time and the movement of peoples have brought new bloodlines to Averland, the Burgundian traditions are still strong. Though no longer raiding their neighbours, except for the occasional civil war, nor riding chariots into battle, Averlanders are steady troops who keep their cool and do not break easily. Their nobles fight in cavalry formations wielding lance and sword, while foot militias of pikemen and crossbowmen provide support. Despite the lack of central coordination from an elector count, the local nobility raised several regiments of foot soldiers to fight the storm of chaos, the remnants of which are returning to the contested province in fits and starts. The people of Averland are a curious lot. Folk whisper the proud bloodline of the Burgundians has curdled somewhat with time. Inbreeding and the looming influence of the Black Mountains. Already considered a little moon-touched by most of the Empire, the accession of Elector Count Mad Marius Leitdorf caused much amusement at Averland's expense. At their best, Averlanders are open, passionate, and honest about just what they're thinking. If a funeral happens to strike them as funny, well, they'll laugh. If someone upsets them, they'll let them know. Known to be generous, especially when entertaining, Averlanders prize those skilled at the art of telling tall tales, something wandering entertainers are very glad of. Dwarves are also very welcome in Averland, as their plain-talking ways are very much admired. At their worst, Averlanders are contradictory, flighty and changeable. Astrology and other such superstition is very popular in Averland, and merchants will often ditch a deal made in an unfavourable hour or on an unlucky day. Marius Leitdorf, known for his dark depressions and strange rages, was considered typical of the Averland temperament. Even troll slayers have been heard to say that Averlanders are a bit odd in the head. Their changeable nature has resulted in many jokes about the regiments of Averlanders retreating in the face of fear, something that irritates them to no end. They resent any implication that their martial prowess is any less than that of any other state. Averlanders are also known for their intolerance of lawyers and contracts, as they imply a man might change his mind. Those dealings with Averlanders are constantly irritated, with their insistence that everything be done on honour, particularly given their unreliable reputation. Some whisper this whim of iron is in fact a cunning bargaining tool of the Averland merchants. Currently, there is no clear ruler of Averland. Their elector, Marius Leitdorf, was killed in 2250 IC, and no one claimant to the title has emerged. The other provinces point out that this is typical of Averlanders, where all other provinces would have a good, honest, short, sharp war. The Averlanders are insisting on a drawn-out game of politics, one-upsmanship and devious manoeuvring. The Leitdorfs are relative newcomers to the reins of power, having ousted the ruling Alptraum family, and seized power in a brilliant, if unconventional, coup. This grab for power seems as if it will be short-lived, however, as the Elector Count's siblings and relatives fight one another for the Alptraums. While they fight one another, the Alptraums are quietly building money and influence once more. To complicate matters, the favours of the nobility seem to change with each phase of the moon. Sometimes they seem to prefer one claimant, and others a different one. No one pretender to the title can count on support against their rivals, a situation some scholars believe to be to the benefit of the wealthy nobility of Averland, for whilst electoral business is carried out in a dead man's name, no new taxes, levies, or trials can take place. Indeed, many merchants have cause to celebrate this temporary reprieve from electoral demands, and are in no hurry to see normality restored. Averlanders have a strange, almost sing-song element to their speech. They tend to soften harsh tones and elongate vowels. Many artists and young nobles with pretensions to poetry imitate an Averland accent, in the belief that all great geniuses are touched by madness. So, guys, fun fact actually about that paragraph, there's actually a typo in it, which is novel. So, it wasn't actually the year 2250, it was the year 2520, which is, you know, basically modern day Warhammer, not 200 years earlier, 300 years earlier. So, yeah, bit of a difference. So yeah, it is actually in recent times that Marius Leitdorf died. And although I said about Storm of Chaos thing, being like, well, pretend Storm of Chaos thing, it didn't happen. Obviously, he didn't die as a result of the Storm of Chaos. And I want to get into that. Because, yeah, so I'm gonna talk about that. So now I'm actually switching from Sigmar's Heirs, which is, I'm sure you notice, what I always use for the introductions on the provinces, and then I tend to wander off into strange new realms to discuss the rest of the places. So yeah, so I'm gonna talk about the Mad Count. So so this is actually under the third battle of Blackfire Pass, which is obviously the famous one that Karl Franz was a part of. So that should be fun. So, Marius Leitdorf, the Mad Count of Averland, had long caused problems for Karl Franz. For years he had challenged the other counts, led nonsensical military campaigns after imaginary foes, and generally upset his neighbours. After Leitdorf's ruthless suppression of the infamous Halfling Rebellion of 2502, Karl Franz dispatched his dour champion, Ludwig Schwarzhelm, who we have in our campaign. Isn't that fun? There he is, you can see him there. Anyway, to hold robust negotiations with the eccentric Elector Count. The cheerless Schwarzhelm's orders were simple. He was to ensure that Leitdorf's notoriously unpredictable behaviour did not imperil the Empire any further. With some unsubtle guidance from Karl Franz through Schwarzhelm, Marius Leitdorf appointed new advisors to curb the worst of his excesses, and the Emperor became fond of the eccentric Count. In 2520, having been returned to the fold of the Emperor's trusted allies, Leitdorf sent word to Karl Franz that a massive horde of greenskins were once again advancing on Blackfire Pass, and that the provincial army of Averland would not be able to hold them back alone. Karl Franz responded with a combined military might of Reichland and Altdorf behind him, including a trio of steam tanks. That's a lot of steam tanks. With such forces at his command, the Emperor reinforced Leitdorf's beleaguered army and stemmed the tide of orcs. During the main charge on the greenskin host, the Emperor witnessed the death of Marius Leitdorf at the hands of the Orc war boss, Vorgaz Ironjaw. Karl Franz eventually won the day by besting the hulking war boss in single combat, claiming bloody retribution. By this, and numerous other victories, as Karl Franz protected his realm and held the Empire's enemies at bay. However, with rumours reaching the Imperial Court of vast northern armies mustering in the realm of chaos, the Empire's darkest hour is about to arrive. So, that's a bit sad, isn't it? It doesn't really talk about Leitdorf much there. But yeah, you know what? I'm gonna dig up some more. Hang on. Okay, so go backways here. This is the Empire Warhammer Armies book. I'm gonna go for the second edition. It's a ruddy old one. We're talking like probably 91. So anyway, so you know, 27 years. Well, 26 years, something like that. Over 25 years, I think. Anyway, so Marius Leitdorf, he's got a little entry here. This is back when they didn't really bother with much fluff. Anyway, Marius Leitdorf is known as the Mad Lord of Averland. He is sullen and morose, and given to bouts of screaming rage, during which no one can reason with him. At other times, he suffers periods of deep depression, when he locks himself away and will speak to no one for weeks. His intense and unpredictable moods have earned him many enemies throughout the Empire. He is no longer welcome at the courts of any other Elector Counts, nor at Altdorf. Marius's taste for fine silks, velvet, and exquisitely fashioned clothing is legendary, and leads some to class him, quite wrongly, as an ineffective fop. He is commonly said to be mad, and may indeed be so, but his unreasoning rage is backed up by a keen and artistic mind. Swordsman, poet, painter, engineer, and inventor, he excels in all of these skills and more. But swordsmanship is unequalled, except perhaps for the Reichsmarshal Kurt Hellborg, a match that has never been put to the test despite years of enmity between the two. Marius fights with two blades, the rune fang in one hand, and a long-bladed dagger in the other, a mode of warfare he has mastered better than anyone. And that is very cool, because you don't see that often. You know, usually people sword and board. So the idiot I am, I forgot that Marius Leitdorf actually has an entry and stats and everything in the Empire 8th edition army book. I don't know why I forgot he was in here. But yeah, he's kind of elusive as a you know, elect count. He doesn't show up in any of the other Empire books apart from like the very first. So I'm so glad they brought him back. You know, talk about him in the 8th edition where they actually have a bit of fluff about it. Although saying that, it's still sod all really. But anyway, renowned as the Mad Count, Marius Leitdorf's reputation has spread far across the old world. Most knew Marius for his eccentricities, his bouts of screaming rage, his periods of melancholy, and his mercurial conduct at court. Indeed, it is common knowledge that he relied on the advice of his warhorse, Daisy Kurt von Hellboring II, as much as any of his advisors. In fact, his outrageous behaviour and roguish improprieties with the daughters and wives of the noble houses were such that few other counts welcomed him in their courts. One of Leitdorf's harshest critics was Kurt Hellborg, who, according to the Mad Count, had a poor moustache, worse dental hygiene, and a sense of humour to rival a troll. At the last point, at least, Marius's judgment was correct, and the enmity between the two was legendary. So yeah, he named his horse after him. You know, Daisy. Originally it was Daisy, but then he decided to add Kurt von Hellboring to wind up Kurt von Hellborg, who was boring. So that's fun. So anyway, however, Leitdorf's reputation did him a gross disservice, for while he was clearly unconventional in his manners and flamboyant in his clothing, he had an incisive mind. Indeed, he was an accomplished poet and an inventor of some standing. Furthermore, Leitdorf was an exceptional swordsman and military tactician who led his armies with considerable flair and skill. In fact, a number of great victories are owed to his insane courage and uncanny insights, and Karl Franz counted Leitdorf amongst his most trusted allies. It was the genuine regret that the Emperor saw Marius fall in battle whilst they led their armies against a massive orc invasion. With his passing, the Empire was robbed of one of its greatest, if most unpredictable, heroes. So what's quite amusing is he's got some other... he's got some extra stats that you don't see often. Well, he's mad. So you actually have to roll a d6. If he fails a leadership test on a 3d6, discarding the lowest result. So whatever you want to take away from that. I think it's quite a hard roll. But if he succeeds, then yeah, he can do whatever he wants. You know, he can do whatever you tell him to. Otherwise, though, you have to roll a d6 and consult this table, which, if you roll a 1, he has lunatic ravings. So Marius recites poetry, does impressions of the Reichsmarshal, and sings bawdy songs about rotund maidens. So for the remainder of the turn, Marius is treated as though he has failed a stupidity test. It basically means you can't do anything with him for the rest of the turn, because he's too busy making, you know, silly impressions of the Reichsmarshal. Kurt von Hellboring. So that's amusing. Or, if you roll a 2, he goes into a berserk rage. The Mad Count's favourite shirt is ruined, and he enters an unreasoning rage. And that's when he gains the Frenzy special rule, until he rolls on this table again. 3 gives him paranoid delusions. Leitdorf is convinced that both his allies and his own shadow are out to get him. And so he immediately makes one close combat attack against a randomly chosen friendly model in base contact. If there are none, treat this result as lunatic ravings instead, which would be the first one, you know, where he just does impressions. But yeah, so he can actually just kill someone standing near him because he's insane. If you roll a 3 at least. If you roll a 4, he gets tactical brilliance. After consulting his warhorse, Daisy, Marius realises that his army needs to be reformed at once. Every friendly unit within 12 inches of Marius may immediately make a reform manoeuvre. These units can still move, charge, march, and shoot as normal during this turn. So, I think that's an advantage. Don't know. 5, outrageous insult. The Mad Count mocks his foe's girth, poor dress sense, and foul odour. And, so yeah, that'll actually give someone a hatred rule against him.
Let us move.
Insane bravado is number 6. Marius believes himself to be invincible and charges off to smite his foes. So he's treated as having rolled a berserk rage result. In addition, he has the stubborn special rule and must accept any challenge until he rolls off this table again. The guy's insane. He's completely mad. I love it. It's like having like an orc hero or something, you know? It's that kind of unpredictability, but in an incredibly sort of ordered army that is the Empire, you know? And then suddenly you just got this guy just completely just throwing everything, you know? Just jumping the shark in terms of entertainment, I think. So, anyway, so he's also got the Averland Runefang, which is, it doesn't say what it's called here, which is a shame. But I now have it on good authority that the Averland Runefang is called Mother's Ruin, which is a bit bizarre. Not quite sure what that's trying to, suggest. But yeah, it says here, Marius is an expert fencer who wields his Runefang alongside a long dagger. Much like, sort of the cool fencer that he is, being this sort of dashing man, this sort of artist. He's crazy, and I love him. I wish he was in the game, just for all the random mechanics that could appear from him in battle. He'd be the most interesting legendary lord, because they'd have to find out, they'd have to put in a load of ways that things can completely backfire or go ridiculous. Like him just killing a load of his own guys that stood next to him and things. It'd be hilarious. But also, a fantastic duelist. So it'd be really interesting to see. And also, his horse should definitely, give him some pretty good props. Like, I don't know, higher leadership or something, because he takes advice from the horse. Or at least he thinks he does. Maybe it's just his own mind trying to tell him something. Who knows? But yeah, so I think it'd be really fun. So please, Creative Assembly, if you ever watch this, Marius Leitdorf, please, thank you, and Daisy too. But anyway, that's enough about lunatics. Let's talk about some significant places. So back to Sigmar's here. Let's talk about Averheim. So, site of the main camp of the Burgundians, Averheim has been the chief city of the land between Ava and the Reich since before Sigmar was born. It sits on a bluff above the Ava, and so is immune from its occasional high floods. At the highest point of the city, at the end of the road leading from Fungzig and Heidek, the fortress of the Elect Count sits behind powerful walls, its towers commanding a view for miles around. Sigurd himself reputedly began the fortress, called the Averberg, after Sigmar made him the count of his new empire. He wanted a symbol so powerful and intimidating that no one, neither rebel nor invader, would ever challenge his rule. And through him, Sigmar. Naturally, the castle has been rebuilt, added to, and repaired several times, so the truth is hard to determine. Scholars believe it certainly dates to the early first millennium, but cannot be sure until they examine the foundations, which would mean entering the crypts of the Elect accounts. Their requests have been regularly denied without explanation. Some wonder if, rather than out of a sense of propriety and privacy, it is perhaps because the rumours are true that Sigurd's shield, spear, and chariot, purported to be the magical artefacts of great power, are buried in the crypt with him. If so, the Elect Counts would not be anxious to let others know they possess such powerful weapons. Averheim is also famous for its stockyards, where the great cattle drives end in the heat and stink of an Averlander summer. For several days the streets are filled with cattle being brought to market, and retainers of the cattle lords eager to spend their pay. The Averheim Watch often hires more help during this time to keep at least some control over the celebrations. The stockyards are near the docks. Sorry, I keep saying stockyards. It's just stockyards. I'm being bizarre here. Anyway, forgive me. The stockyards are near the docks, where the slaughterhouses are located, so the cut meat can be salted, cured, and loaded onto barges for easy transportation. Recently, a cabal of merchants has begun experimenting with ice brought from the mountains and kept magically cool, to keep the meat fresh during shipment. The Salters Guild of Averheim has threatened violence if the experiment continues. I do love that. So rather than, inventing refrigeration, they use magic to do it. And I just love that sort of innovation, because yeah, there's so many things in Warhammer. You think, why don't you just use magic? Magic can do basically anything. Just use that. And this is a case where it's like, oh, right, yeah, magic has been used brilliantly here. But also, that sounds kind of like ice magic, which is novel. Anyway, a famous monument in the city is the Pillar of Skulls, marking the high point of Gorbad Ironclaw's army efforts in Averland in the 18th century. Although the Averberg itself has never fallen, the city was penetrated and Gorbad's forces made it as far as the Plenzerplatz, the city's main square. There the Grand Count and his personal guard, and the remaining soldiers of Averland set upon them. Slaughtered by the hundreds, Gorbad's army was forced to move on, and the Elect Count ordered a monument built from the skulls of the dead orcs. To this day, it is said that blood drips from the eye sockets of some of the skulls on the Night of Mystery. That's gruesome, isn't it? Anyway, in present times, control of Averheim has not been clean-cut affair. Whilst the family of Marius Leitdorf nominally owns and administers the lands and legalities of Averheim, their constant infighting has allowed several factions to gain power within the city. Many noble families, most notably the Alptroms, have garnered influence with local guilds and merchants. Gossips in the street whisper of criminal connections, and of bribery and coercion. Certainly, the local Temple of Sigmar has received some hefty donations recently, judging from the latest round of building and decoration. Thieves too have become more brazen of late. Whilst the City Watch continues to keep the peace in the name of the Count, they lack leadership and funds to deal with the large gangs that have started to rear their heads. No one can say for sure if these groups are a result of political manoeuvring on the part of the nobility, or just speak of the lack of order. Most believe that rulership of Averheim is the key to the title of Elect Count. With such a prize on offer, it can only be a matter of time before the simmering undercurrent of violence boils over, bringing blood to the streets and change in high places. So that's fun, bit of political intrigue. That's what happens when you got no ruler. Yeah, what a great ruler he would have been as well. Absolute barking mad count. Anyway, next we have Hajduk, which isn't in Total War, but so few places aren't. So many places aren't, rather. So built as a way station on the Old Dwarf Road at the height of the Dwarf Empire, Hajduk was in ruins when humans first occupied the area in the first millennium. It has since become an important crossroads for traffic from the Upper Reich via Agbeiten and from Blackfire Pass to Averheim, and vice versa. A solid, if dull place, it has a cattle market for those who do not want to go all the way to Averheim. Scholars come to Hajduk to examine the remaining dwarf ruins, and treasure seekers often visit to find a way into the lost dwarf catacombs. Reportedly sealed long ago and filled with riches. Whether these catacombs exist, the Hajdukers make a fair bit of coin selling authentic maps to credulous visitors. Like Averheim, control of Hajduk is contested by several elements. Local politicians and bailiffs work to realise the greater schemes of nobles, merchants, idealists, and radicals. Some believe that Hajduk will sell its support in return for a charter of independence, whilst others think the town will remain loyal to the Leitdorfs. Only time will tell. Next we have Grenstadt, which is in the game, so that'll be fun. Not a lot about it though. Also ruled by a representative of the Elect Count, the fortress town of Grenstadt guards the western end of the Blackfire Pass, and the Old Dwarf Road passes through it. Grenstadt is the centre of the fur, gem, and metals trade, with a large guild market and warehouses within its walls. Not surprisingly, the town has a relatively large dwarf population, perhaps 10% of the total. They act as trading agents for their clans and provide high-quality services for those who can afford their prices. Tavern gossip also say they keep watch on local activities, looking for those who plunder dwarf property and try to smuggle it into the Empire. These same wags also claim this explains the recent disappearance of several miners who bragged of a big new strike in the hills. Interesting. So next we have Streissen. Again, not in the game, but we'll find out about it nonetheless. If the spirit of revolution has taken hold among the usually traditional Averlanders, it is in the town of Streissen. A town with a small university and a medical school, Streissen has always been ready to take in new ideas from elsewhere, such that Averlanders often refer to someone from Streissen as not quite right in the head, or too much under the influence of Nullners and Sterlanders. Streissen's middle and upper classes take pride in their relative openness to new ideas and think of themselves as Averland's intellectual elite. Thus it was that, over the course of the last century, and under the influence of new political ideas from Nuln, Streissen's rulers managed events to force the Elector Countess, a young Ludmilla Alptraum, to grant Streissen a town charter, granting it rights, including the right to elect its own rulers, and freeing it from many duties and the taxes to the crown in Averheim. For decades, the people of Streissen looked optimistically toward a bright future. But then, in 2502, riots broke out when crop disease produced a shortage of food. The authorities, who had neglected building anything more than a minimal watch, were helpless when agitators took control of the mob and declared a commune. A town council appealed to a now elderly Grand Countess Ludmilla for troops to suppress the revolution, but she would do so only if the councillors agreed to return the town's charter and give up all its hard-won privileges. In desperation, they did so, and Ludmilla's forces restored order in a bloodbath that has made Streissen a byword for atrocity to this day. Now, the bailiff rules Streissen in the name of the dead count. The university was purged of its radical staff, and no one speaks of self-rule or rule of the people anymore. At least, not openly. Few believe this town will lend its support to the Alptraum cause. Streissen, the walled town of whitewashed houses and public parks, is a hotbed of clandestine conspiracies against the rule of Averheim. Agitators and other troublemakers hold quiet meetings with anyone who has a grievance, trying to turn them to the cause. There are reports that chaos cults are active in the region, seeking to subvert the authorities and the revolutionaries. This may only be a rumour born of nerves in wartime, but if true, it poses a great threat. So, that kind of sums it up for Averheim, I believe. So, yeah, we got some more time though. So, I guess I'll have to find something else to fill the time with, right? And, you know what? I'll find something. Hang on a minute. You know what, guys? Random bestiary entry here. Let's talk about Griffins. Because everyone loves a good Griffin mount, and I haven't talked about Griffins at all. We've had Karl Franz running around on Deathclaw all day, we haven't mentioned it. So, Griffins, guys, Griffins. So, with their powerful hooked beaks and razor-sharp talons, Griffins are among the deadliest aerial predators in the old world. Griffins are a strange amalgam of creatures. They have the heads, front legs, and large feathered wings of a bird of prey, coupled with the body, tail, and hindquarters of a lion, a tiger, or other large cat. A few of the Empire's wealthiest noblemen ride upon the backs of Griffins to war, including the Emperor Karl Franz, whose legendary Griffin Deathclaw is a faithful beast that has saved him from death on the battlefield several times. Tame Griffins are hatched from eggs stolen from nests in the wild. This is a perilous business, as in the wild these creatures are far from tame. Most Griffins dwell in nests atop the highest peaks in the World's Edge Mountains, and soar high in the sky to pick out prey on the ground below. With terrifying speed and strength, a hunting Griffin swoops down to claim its prize, and anything smaller than itself is fair game. So how cool is that? So obviously they can fly, and they're terrifying. But yeah, so I thought it'd be worth talking about Griffins quickly there. And what's next? You know what? I haven't... what else is a good one? What's a good thing to talk about? Okay, so next up, something that I just haven't had an excuse to talk about. Not really. I suppose one of these spoke about Nuln a bit, but... basically they're not in the game yet. It's Master Engineers. We don't have Master Engineers as a hero type yet. And I say yet, because I really hope we do have them. I mean, there's basically equivalents in like the Dwarf roster and stuff. It seems odd that the Empire doesn't have them, because they're cool. But anyway, so Master Engineers are eccentric individuals who are obsessed with designing new machines and technological marvels. Many are also gifted artists, writers, and musicians. Thought inventing is just one avenue for their creative thoughts to express themselves. When their energies are focused in the workshops of the Imperial Engineers School, they can be found tinkering with half-finished inventions and developing new technological weapons for the Emperor's arsenal. Master Engineers can be struck by inspiration for a novel war machine at any time, and when a new idea gets stuck in their heads, they will become totally absorbed with its creation, eschewing distractions like food or sleep until they see their vision realized. These inventors tend to mutter incomprehensible gobbledygook to themselves as they bustle from one machine to another in an attempt to improve their performance. Normal citizens of the Empire quite rightly think that engineers are a little bit mad, and they try to avoid them whenever possible. The contraptions engineers bring to battle range from utterly lethal devices, such as the steam tank and Hellstorm rocket batteries, to the downright bizarre, such as von Hugon's Terror Bell, the Thunder Barrel, the Hurstel Wenkler Pigeon Bomb, or a whole array of other deadly devices. These inventions rarely work, or at least not in the intended way, but every now and again a master engineer will succeed in creating a new and strange war machine that can have quite lethal consequences, usually, but not always, for the enemy. The youngest engineers show a burning desire to personally try out their latest inventions on the battlefield. The older master engineers have seen enough malfunction in their time to know better than to field test their devices themselves. Instead, they prefer to entrust their prototypes some eager, youthful fellow whilst they observe from a safe distance. However, it is not just their positions as inventors and suppliers of deadly weapons that make master engineers valuable on the battlefield. While they are not soldiers, master engineers are still part of the Emperor's forces. They can often be found taking advantage of battlefield conditions to snipe at the enemy with variety of powerful experimental rifles and handguns. However, sometimes master engineers just can't resist the appeal of being in charge of the really big guns. On the battlefield, individuals from the Imperial Engineers School attend to the artillery of the Empire forces, making small adjustments here and there as the battle rages, and ensuring that the war machines function correctly. Engineers also tend to oversee the development of the army's artillery pieces, baffling gunners with talk of parabolic arcs, trajectories, and wind speeds. Artillery crews often resent the presence of master engineers, seeing them as pompous bookworms who get in the way with lofty academic theories and no real practical experience. However, many a gunner has had to swallow his own words after seeing the effects of the engineers' labours. Entire enemy regiments being shredded by a decent hit from a mortar shell, a whole cavalry column torn asunder by a well-placed cannonball, or a ferocious monster suffering the full onslaught of a Hellblaster volley gun. Whether the carnage caused was a result of careful calculation, or just blind luck, the feeling seems to be that the presence of the master engineer really does make artillery more reliable and accurate. Most of the time, anyway. So that's fun. Yeah, so master engineers. It'd be nice to see them. I mean, it's very similar to what they've got with the dwarfs. You know, they have their engineers as well. So it'd be quite a similar thing. But you know, they do have pigeon bombs. So, you know, pigeon bombs, guys. I want to see some pigeon bombs. I think that'd be hilarious. Although, you know, let's not use real pigeons. You know, let's just pretend that's shorthand for, I don't know, something horrible that no one likes. Flying rats. There we go. Again, that's just a nickname for a pigeon, isn't it? Pigeons get a bad rep, don't they? In cities, at least. I mean, I'm not in a city, and I find them quite charming. So, you know, what can you say? So yeah, guys, that about wraps it up. So obviously, we went on a bit of a tangent with a couple of other things, because frankly, I didn't want to start talking about Ostermark at the end of an episode. I wanted to keep it on its own, you know, so people can find it, basically. So I want to start at the start of an episode. So it'll be next episode, and actually, when I say next episode, it'll be the next campaign episode, which will be our last one. That's right, it's going to be the last episode of the campaign. So that's one to watch. So, or is it? I don't know, really. Not huge epic battle, we got that out of the way already. But it is the end of an era, you know, end of a very, very long series. Although I will probably be adding some extra random episodes at the end before Total War 2 comes out, because I don't think I'll have time to do much of a series of anything before then. So I'll just basically round off, you know, sort of some of the different religions and some of the different orders of magic, stuff like that. And I realised I could have actually just done this little outro, and we probably would have got to the end of the footage anyway. So, you know, absolutely typical, isn't it? So, yeah, so guys, if you enjoyed this, please do comment, like, and subscribe. And in the next episode, it'll be episode 24 point... Is it 24? 24.5 it'll be. Which will be finishing off talking about Talbekland, because we didn't get a chance to talk about it properly, because things were moving so quickly. So we'll be doing that, and then talking about Ostermark, and then I'm probably going to, you know, say, oh no, I need more time to talk about Ostermark, because I'd probably want to talk about Mordheim as well. The city of the damned, which is, is lost at the moment, is smashed to crap. And I'll talk about that as well. I think some of it's covered, actually, in the Ostermark content, but I might want to go into more detail about it, because it's quite a cool thing. But we'll see. But it's the last episode. Last campaign episode. The next campaign episode will be, at least. Which is pretty cool. Yeah, fantastic. Finally. And in time for Total War Warhammer 2, which is great. And it does give me a bit more time to talk about the other stuff, like I said. So guys, thank you so much for sticking with the series. It's been great. Really enjoyed all the feedback and things. It's been really good. So, feel free to start leaving a load of feedback for, what you want to see in the Total War 2 campaign lore plays, because I will be doing lore plays for them. Hopefully doing a lot of them. I might even do a couple of traditional Let's Plays for, my favourites, just so I get more content out for you guys. And, see how things go. So, so leave me some feedback. So, guys, yes, finally I'll end this episode because we're on 41 minutes. Seriously? Yes, thank you and goodbye. Have a good day.